I want to kick off this morning by welcoming Mercedes Vidal Lobato. She is the former head of business innovation from IKEA Group. Also worked with Clarks on the digital strategy. Mercedes led from the core of the digital transformation of Clarks, developed their digital strategy and led the business and technical teams. Within IKEA, Mercedes led the customer experience development and innovation agenda with the objective to ensure optimal and innovative business solutions across the customer experience journey, meeting both the needs of customers, co-workers, and IKEA's business in a fast-changing environment. So I can see Mercedes has joined us now. So a warm welcome and good morning to you, Mercedes. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Chris. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
No, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. Really glad that we could make this happen. We've got some great questions lined up, and it's a real honour to kind of be able to get some insights and hear from your angle on all these different topics. For the audience, what we're going to try and achieve throughout this interview is just kind of navigate a little bit through Mercedes' experience at IKEA and Clarks, and just in general in Mercedes' work in digital transformation and customer experience and tying everything together. Got a wealth of experience within that, so it's great to have you with us, Mercedes. Perhaps if you could just, I've kind of given a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you're about, but perhaps you can share a little more with the audience, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good time. My background is almost 20 years in the IT industry, working with development, architecture, many different roles in the discipline of IT. And then turned into the business side in 2008, primarily working with bringing IT closer to business and developing business capabilities and introducing digital already in the years 2008, 2009, and bringing much more closer together the ways of working between IT and business. I have done several roles, most of them in big corporation in headquarters. Running IKEA.com, moving them from an electronic catalog to multi-channel experience for all our customers at IKEA. That was an amazing journey and full load with a lot of change management and technology implementations. And lately, I helped Clarks with their digital strategy. During a period of time, I was running as well innovation for retail, the retail area of IKEA, introducing technologies into our stores, our contact centers, and bringing closer IKEA to all our customers. So mostly working always with customer-facing capabilities and always close to technology.
Nice, that's really good. So with that as the way I kind of always like to open interviews, panel discussions, is kind of defining digital transformation. So it means a lot of different things to different people depending on the part they play within the digital ecosystem. I know you've mentioned that you were more on the customer facing side of things. So I guess digital transformation for you may be kind of more of an outward facing thing for the organization, but perhaps if you could share your kind of perspective on digital transformation and what it means to you and the work that you've done.
Yeah. Digital transformation has happened through the course of many years. Before, it was mostly to making automatization of different business processes using software development. Robotics is another thing that came in late this year when technology started to replace some of the manual works. But for me, the biggest aha when we start to introduce digital product, digital services that were not there before in our business model, when people needed to develop their skill sets and the capabilities to actually manage completely different ecosystems of products.
Mhm.
using as well new methodologies like agile development, like even reusing some of the experience of innovation when
Mhm.
doing business development became much more the norm, and nowadays that's the norm. So technology has been, you can say, the common denominator when it comes to digitalization, but as well ways of working and mindset has come in much more higher on the
Mhm.
importance of what digital really mean for companies in the last years.
Mhm.
And nowadays, digitalization is much more closer to ways of working that belonging to the software industry before, like agile, is very
Mhm.
much close now with digitalization. Services that only exist on a digital world,
Mhm.
like online services and digital services. So mostly for me right now is mindset, and is of course letting the technology helping us to do things that before were very manual.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good answer. And then with the pandemic, over the last 6 months, it's forced many organisations, companies to operate, very differently to, their traditional business model would allow, especially with things like digital transformation. So they are having to offer things through different channels and platforms, whereas before, maybe it wasn't, entirely necessary for them. What do you think organisations should be looking at with respect to digital and technology transformation? Should they be focusing more on the employee infrastructure or more on the outward facing, so the customer experience and things like that? Obviously, it's probably going to be a bit of both. But what kind of transformation should organisations be looking at right now?
Well, I think we all have experienced a tremendous acceleration of the incorporation of technologies into our business models. But it's not only that. I think companies have understood as well the pure sense of collaboration. I think we have seen through the pandemic companies that have been reaching out to other services and other areas of business to join forces and to reach customers. And I
Mhm.
think that will stay. Together we are much more stronger. Our customers are demanding more and more experience, and sometimes companies cannot reach only with their portfolio of services or products the
Mhm.
demands out there. From a co-worker point of view, you mentioned remote working have put tremendous stress on all IT organizations. I think the demand was there before, but it was not as urgent as it become right now.
Mhm.
Other things that have become, and I think they will stay, is as well the incorporation of technologies like artificial intelligence
Mhm.
that have helped to make decisions much more quicker, has
Mhm.
helped as well organizations to reach out with good personalization to customers, and
Mhm.
that will stay. But there are other things that have been very stressed by the pandemic, and they are on the back end, on the supply chain, on the operational models, where we could see that we could not reach products that were stuck on the lockdown in different countries. We understood as well how vulnerable organizations are when they have an supply chain, a logistic, even a production that is very far away from the core of the company.
Mhm.
That has helped us to rethink a lot of business models. That has helped us as well to understand that we need to be a little more self-sufficient in some areas,
Mhm.
as well as the collaboration. So it's many different aspects that pandemic has teach us a very very hard lesson, and some of the barriers that were there before for make some of the decisions around digitalizations,
Mhm.
they didn't exist right now because the necessity is much more bigger.
Mhm. And then yesterday, a lot of conversation revolved around automation. Do you think that's going to obviously organisations are bringing in more automated processes and technologies to kind of streamline and make businesses more lean, agile, and whatnot. How's that going to come into play more so, or will it?
Well, I think when people are staying at home, the operational processes in many company has been suffering a
Mm.
lot, and automatization helps to cover some of those gaps, as well as increase productivity probably and efficiency and effectiveness. And we all are in a situation where our costs are under a lot of pressure. So
Yeah.
everything that can help to streamline some of the processes to increase profitability of our bottom line, I'm going to stay here, that's
Mm.
for sure. And as I said before, some of the hinders on the, you can say, the governance and the decision-making process that were very slowly, didn't prioritize those investment, and that has been on the focus of the core of many companies right now. So yes, it's gonna increase probably much more than we have seen through the pandemic when some budgets will be released again.
Yeah, sure. And then going back to you mentioned about remote work, and that's kind of what work looks like for now, for at least. There's lots of things like hybrid working ideas being thrown around at the moment, and a lot of businesses are trying to get understanding of how that might look and how that might work. What's going to be the expectation of business leaders, with regards to remote work? How can they effectively lead an organization or lead a team, when everyone's spread out everywhere in terms of, more localized workforces?
That's a very good question. I think the whole aspect of remote working has a good side and a bad side. There's a lot of people that enjoy very much working from home, and there is others that doesn't like it that much. When it comes to leaders and when it comes to companies, I think there is a couple of key factors that are going to be very important moving forward. One of them, how to measure productivity so they don't drop. Productivity for companies is key, but when you are working remotely, how you're going to make sure that your coworkers still are productive, they are engaged, the motivation elements that you had before are up to date. So how to motivate them, how to keep them, feeling part of a purpose. So I think leaders are going to need to rethink the purpose of the teams, the purpose of the company, making sure that those are clear, that they're very clear, communicated to their coworkers. I think as well the facilitation peer to peer, so they don't become isolated as employees. So making sure that there is good environments for them to engage, to share experience, to reward, so you could feel that you are not just invisible behind a screen, that you belong to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
So in the sense of belonging, the sense of motivation and engagement, it's going to be very important for leaders to keep it up in the agenda, and very clear with actions, transparency, and really creating that sense of belonging between your co-workers.
Sure. And then there's been quite a lot in the media the last couple of weeks. I saw one horror story where a CEO had installed kind of like Big Brother software, i.e. screenshotting employee screens at random times to make sure they're doing the job. How you mentioned their productivity and things. How can we measure that, or does that even need to change in terms of how it's monitored? Is it just about setting a clear message from the top level?
I think it needs to change. I think it's much more difficult when you are apart, when you don't see each other. I don't think the Big Brother kind of thing is going to be a good success story. I think the trust, the commitment, and the engagement needs to come from the heart of your coworkers, not because the camera is watching you. And as I said before, I think it's very important that in the communication, the clear actions, the trust between employees and their managers, but as well the sense of collaboration between your coworkers are going to be in the top of the agenda. I think it's very important to create a sense of purpose, as I said before. And when you go back to what motivates people, what engages people, is not that you're just watching them, because that doesn't happen either at the workplace, but it's more the clear commitment and the clear engagement that as a leaders we need to create in our communities.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of it kind of just boils down to trust
Yes.
in the workforce. Very good point. So in moving away from kind of remote work for the time being, yesterday again and 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about disconnect between kind of the business or the finance side of business and the IT, digital technology part of the business. I think it's often covered that a lot of organizations have this difficulty, where they're trying to, adopt different technology or practices, but they struggle to get buy-in from the CFO or whatever that may be. With the pandemic, it can probably cause more separation between the business and IT and individuals within business, especially people almost working in silo. Have you ever experienced in your career that disconnect, and have you worked at bringing that closer together? What were kind of the challenges, and did you succeed in the end in doing so? And I know that's a pretty big question. Yeah, I think it's quite a good, relevant one.
It's a question that I have very close to my heart. My first role when I moved from IT to business was actually to create what we call at the time on IKEA demand organization. And my mission was to make sure that I engage business colleagues into the business development processes, so they don't keep throwing balls to the IT court and then expecting something back. That was more or less the way of working before.
Mm-hmm.
We always have been there when you say business say, oh, I ordered a bicycle and I got back a banana. So the ways of working between business and IT has been part of my career in many years. And everything started with a huge differences in the communication, very big distance between what was important for IT, what was important for business, a lack of interest sometimes on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as seeing the other discipline like something very strange and difficult to understand. So a lot of my work was to create communication, to explain clearly in the language that people could understand the importance of technology, the importance of process and process development, and as well that technology is not something very strange. And IT people doesn't have two heads and 20 fingers. So they are as human as the business people. So many of the things that I did through my career was involving each other's organization, creating environments where you work around the table. I mean, Agile as a principle has that. It's different roles from different sides of the organization working together to create value for customers. Starting every meeting on IT, going through the business figures. So how well is the business doing? What are the customers saying about our products and services? And creating that sense of we all are here for only one purpose, is to make sure our customers are happy, independent which department you work.
Yeah.
And that has been my mantra in all my roles, making sure I bridge between technology and business, bringing business closer to technology and vice versa, bringing technology closer to business. And I started to talk things that are important. How is our bottom line? How much this is cost internally? And those things that are the bread and the butter of any company needs to become the bread and the butter of all the organization. And customers and customer experience framework is a very good platform to bring in people together, because it forces everybody to have an outside-in perspective of things and not a vertical, my department, my discipline kind of view of things. So putting the glasses of your customers in any side of the organization is, believe me, a winning formula.
No, that's a really good answer. And then just quickly on that as well, we had a presentation from a gentleman from Novartis yesterday, and he was also talking about the potential cultural disconnect between business and IT. He was saying traditionally, and it could be stereotypically, that the finance side of the business is always very straight-laced, formal, and then the technology teams are a little bit more laid-back, informal. Does that often come into play, or is that kind of just more of a generalization?
I will say yes and no. I will say we have a tradition to measure departments very different. When you go into an IT department, until very few years ago, I would say, you always mention cost. And we were seeing IT scene like a cost organization. It costs a lot of money to have this and that. And it takes time to change that mentality. So when you start to measure not only by cost, you start to measure by value, by profitability, by speed and efficiency, then the conversation start to change. So I've been sitting around budget discussion where we could, without blink, talk about the money necessary to create a new store. But when you talk about the money necessary to implement a capability, everybody's like, "Oh my God!" So it's very interesting how we have been measuring technology and technology capabilities versus brick and mortar or investments in marketing or whatever other production unit that you need to create. So we need to start to change the way we see IT, because in the same way you need to have your infrastructure in your facilities. IT is a huge part of your infrastructure, and when you start to see um, digital services, then the ball game completely change, because a digital service requires a completely different set of capabilities
Mm-hmm.
that you don't see it as a strange way. I'm talking about a physical product, but when you talk about a digital product, it's a completely different thing. So things are changing, and changing quite rapidly, and people are start to not only measure IT as a cost, and then start to measure it as an enable capability, as a growth driver. And in the life that we live today, with the digitalization, you really need digital growth drivers.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. Thank you. And then a big topic kind of in and around digital transformation is that of emerging technology. So um, in my job, I'm often refer to kind of the Gartner hype cycle and seeing, what's on the up, what's on the down, what's plateau, where things are at. In your experience within IKEA and Clark's, were there any of these kind of big emerging technologies that really came to the forefront and did transform the business for the better kind of thing?
While AI is doing that massively, particularly at IKEA, I think the whole decision process, dashboard, the understanding of customers and what customers are telling us, everything that needs to bring closer any kind of brand to customers, are rapidly adopting technologies like machine learning and artificial
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. That is changing even the ecosystem of call centers, for instance, with the
Yeah,
introduction of chatbots
yeah,
that helps to alleviate some of the pains of queues and repetitive questions. That takes away the good connection, the human connection that adds a little more professional value. And those things are adopting and changing a lot of the business model, as well, creating a more engaging experience. I will say, from a more physical point of view, IoT has tremendous potential,
mm,
particular for complex purchase processes and complex store environments.
mm,
And from a digital point of view, artificial intelligence can help to personalize experience and actually helping customers to find what they are looking for.
mm,
Those things I've seen a rapid implementation in the latest years, I would say. And this year, a lot of companies are using artificial intelligence to come much more closer to customers and much more quicker into matching needs and
mhm.
products. So I have seen a rapid implementation of those, yes.
Sure. And then looking at kind of the retail sector individually, it's an often debated area. We're seeing shops closing down. We're seeing the diminishment of the high street. Is it completely essential for retailers to take technology a bit more seriously and make that customer experience, that physical customer experience, kind of intertwined with the digital experience, combining both the online and the offline channels together, kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you see on the share of time, let's put it in that way, the share of time that a customer spend between your different channels, they have moved away from browsing around physically in the stores to
Mm,
browsing around digitally in the retail space. And that creates a big competition, because in the digital space is the reach is much more higher. You
mm,
can reach competitors in a blink of in 2 clicks,
mm,
where in the physical store you have them in an environment, what demands that retailers create a super engaging experience digitally, but as well, if at the end of the day they decided to continue the engagement with your brand, when they come physically to your stores, it's not just to reach the inventory, it needs to be to get the last engaging experience.
yeah.
And in that way, and the stores needs to change more to an experience center and not just an inventory warehouse,
Mm,
where customers can get the last push to convince them to become your advocacy for your brand.
Mm.
So using the competences, the environments that are needs to change, they cannot cope with so many people. So the distance creating that the experience needs to be completely different
Yeah.
in a completely different level.
Mhm.
And using, of course, logistics and distribution and everything that online brings with you to at least get the goods to your customers. That's the easier part, so to say, and the more elaborated one is experience. And the blend of good professional services, a top of the line engagement in your stores versus the browsing, the filtering, the personalization you can do online
Mm.
together can be a very good combination.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. And then with, again, your experience with IKEA, Clark's, when you were kind of going about strategies, whether that's customer-facing strategy or organizational strategy, and kind of the operating model, how often do you kind of reevaluate and recheck where you're at, and go back to the drawing board? Because the thing with technology is it's constantly evolving. We're always grasping and wanting the new shiny tech. How do you kind of go about both adopting it, making the decision to adopt it, and what's the process for kind of that strategy? Because it must evolve so much for these larger organizations on a constant basis.
That's a very, very interesting question. I mean, all of us have been in big corporations and think every second year is like, now we go again, a big reorganization, and everybody gets a new manager, move things to the left and to the right, and sometimes you can wonder what was the trigger of that change this time. Often has been, connecting to some change in a business model or the acquisition of a big capability where you need to rethink, your processes and the division of activities and relearn some skills for demands probably new roles. What is happening today, mostly when you start to look at business development and the area of agile development and so on, organizations have become much more modular, to the flexibility of matching and bringing competences together, give us the possibility to not need it to change so often the structure, but more getting a collaboration mindset in your organization where you can bring experts together to perform a particular task. Sometimes could be develop or further improve a capability. Sometimes could be solving a problem where SMEs, product owners, and other kind of roles match together in a much more horizontal organization and not that much in a vertical organization. And that we have Agile to thank for, and a product-oriented organization to thank us for. And that helped us, like through the pandemic, to very quickly form from core teams that are very focused and very rapidly develop results and value. And I hope that kind of mindset stays, because these massive, very static organizations bring with them a lot of bureaucracy and inefficiency, a very slowly decision-making process, where the agile organizations are much more dynamic and can adapt to the needs much more quicker. And I
Mm.
think we all need to be very humble to see what has happened in the world or still is happening in the world, and to have the capability to adapt to the circumstances and the situation quickly is a survival tactic moving forward. So really hope that organizations permanent a little bit what we have learned, forced by the pandemic, to be much more flexible when we bring teams together,
Mm.
and then the big organizational change start to be part of the past and the history, and the dynamic way of working with teams that comes together and collaborate in task will be the new norm. I hope for that. I really believe in that.
Yeah, and then with regards to putting kind of technology cases forward to senior leadership, whether that's the CEOs, CTO pitching CEO, or whatever that might be, what do kind of leaders need to consider when putting a case forward, and where perhaps, apart from costs, of course, can they expect resistance from top level buy-in?
What I have been experienced through the last years, and I think looking ahead of us, software development and technology investment has changed as well. I mean, from everything from hosting in premises and big, big platforms acquisition that brings very often huge investment, very painful implementation process. That has been very often one of the hinders of making that decision and waiting until the last moment to do it. I think now what we're seeing as well with cloud, where hosting and using service as you go, software as a service, help us to have a much more flexible investment model. And that flexibility helps very, very often to make decisions where you don't need to commit several millions ahead. You can scale up the capability implementation as you go. And that the release funds, so you don't kidnap them up front. You release them as the value start to be generated. And when you start to generate value, the discussion changes completely because the return of investment is a reality. It's not a paper construction. So what I can see and what I think companies need to do is think scalability. Use a little bit of philosophy of the startups. Start with the core component that you need. Don't start with the things out in the periphery. Go like an MVP, minimal viable product, and build solutions that are more scalable as you go. So software as a service, cloud, and all this kind of new shapes and forms of technology and capabilities help in that decision. And then the decision will be more easy because it's not that long commitment, it's a more release as you go commitment.
Nice. We've had a question coming from the audience from Sophie. What are your thoughts on augmented reality within retail and the future of this technology?
Well, going a little bit back to the question before, the physical and the digital experience, I think we can see now there is some luxury brands that are bringing the catwalk to the top of your computer. I think I've seen some examples lately in the news. I really believe that that's a technology to stay. The same way, I think the stores and the store environment to bring that in augmented reality on a digital format is going to help as well. The experience of the browsing, even if it is not exactly the same, but come a little bit closer. So creating those environment where customers can see and browse around, can see the product almost in three-dimensional kind of shape and form, helps with the decision making process. The backside of that, if there is one, is that you need to have digital content available. So you need to think through what will be those top elements and top engagement experience that I want to digitalize, create a very good content, because a bad content in augmented reality can be very, like a cartoon kind of thing.
Yeah.
So make sure that you invest money in your digital experience, in your digital content, and make it really good and really, really wow. And then the wow effect will come. So I believe it will stay. It helps to bridge physical and digital closer to customers.
Nice. And then there's clearly, out of the crisis, mostly negative things have come from it, for the economy, for everything, welfare and everything. But has any good come from the crisis? And what I mean by that is, has it kind of triggered more innovation within certain industries, and has it been the push needed for certain organizations, how they operate on bettering their customer experience? We said at the start about organizations being forced into pivots and forced into some transformation projects. Is that a good thing?
I believe so. Of course, everything has a backside. The core component of innovation is experimentation, and I think we have seen a lot of experimentation examples through the pandemic. We have seen a lot of collaboration with ecosystems that didn't exist before, or we didn't really reach out, as I was saying in the beginning of this conversation. And I think that's a very good thing. The pandemic brought us together. It's like stronger together we are stronger. Those things, I think they're going to be permanent, and I really hope they will be permanent. Other things that have been created a sense of environment when the supply chain and the production is so far away, and suddenly you don't have even accessibility to core components for your production, have make a lot of companies to rethink Maybe I need to bring my production closer home. And production closer home means as well, you know, growth in the industry and the area around, less transportation, and a lot of good things for the environment. So I hope those things becomes permanent. The other thing that I think is very good, particularly for big companies, is the decision-making process was so slowly, and now through the pandemic has been accelerated. So we have managed to take away some of those barriers that didn't allow us to go fast enough before. And now we have seen incredibly things shorting down the time from 1 year to 3 weeks. That's amazing. And I hope that will be permanent. And of course, sometimes with the speed, things are not perfect. But in innovation, in the big first releases, they are not perfect either. So there is a different kind of tolerance. So 2080, 80% good enough is good enough. So go for it.
Yes. And then another question in, and I think we're going back to where we were talking about remote work at the start. What is your opinion on kind of the hybrid working model? Will larger organisations be able to kind of deal with the infrastructure required for that, and is it a right move in the right direction?
I think so. There is a good benefits of this hybrid mode. Among the things, the efficiency and the cost reduction in big offices. I mean, the traffic, you live in an area where the highway gets so crowded. Now you can't transport yourself. So it's a lot of good benefits. From a company point of view, one of the things that we were a little more resilient before was like, maybe, if the people at work, they are not going to work. They are going to, be doing other things. And now we have seen that the productivity has not been dropping. So the sense of responsibility that we all have as a community, as a co-worker, has been proved that we can work from home. And working from home means as well you have a little better work-life balance, which is very good for everybody, particularly when you have kids and everything else. And happy co-workers work better, that's for sure. So good motivations and cost reductions in office. I think they're gonna be here for a long time. We have been proven to companies that we can do it. So there is not any reasons for not continuing with this hybrid model anymore.
Nice, yeah. And then obviously with a lot of organisations, budgets and are going to be cost cutting is going to be a thing as we move through the 2021. Yet technology adoption and digital tools and technologies will be essential for organisations to remain competitive and move forward through and beyond the pandemic. With obviously those obvious cost cuts coming into place, how can organisations cope with the need to kind of onboard new technology? What can the strategy be in place for them?
Well, it's a very, 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 very good question. I wish I have the answer for everybody. What I do believe is you need to reprioritize a lot. I think companies need to start to see what things are here to stay, what things are not needed anymore. And with that, some things will be turned down, but I think new opportunities will show up as well. I think we need to be all of us a little more lean, a little more focused, less, things, take away everything that is superficial, go to the core. Technology, as I said before, has been changed a lot. You don't need to buy big platforms anymore. Collaborate, do what you are good on. And the things that you are not that good, collaborate with someone else to create better partnership, to become stronger. I think focus should be very much on creating right services. A lot of digital services need to be created and use your talent, the talent of your people to develop that growth agenda and focus what are the things that are going to make your company grow in the future. Reprioritize and keeping leaning forward and reach out for collaborations. I think there is amazing collaborations to come.
Nice. We've got a really good question in about your transition from IKEA to Clark's. How much did kind of the structure differ, and how did you kind of adapt to the change in place as kind of a digital leader?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you need to be careful what you wish for. So I wish a change. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to experience a completely new environment. That's why I moved to UK from Sweden and to Clark. So it was a double change. It was the culture, working in a UK environment with UK colleagues around me. Everybody was from UK. I was the only strange people in the club, but as well, you come from a big corporation like IKEA with a lot of processes, a lot of technology, long career, huge brand, and then you land in Klaus, a completely different environment, much more lean organization, different tradition, and a different level of sophistication, I may say so.
Mhm.
And I think the biggest thing that I brought with me that helped me to adapt was the knowledge of bridging IT and business,
Okay.
because that was a huge necessity of Clark's too. Bringing much more closer together technology and digital into the core of the business was my mission. The digital strategy was all about that, making
Mhm.
sure that the organization collaborate cross boundaries, cross organizations. I utilize customer frameworks, customer experience framework. That was my mantra moving forward. Don't talk about shoes, talk about customers. Customers are even more important than shoes. And that helped me to navigate the change and the transformation. People were incredibly helpful and
Mhm.
welcoming. So that helped a lot to have an open mindset in an organization,
Yeah.
to welcome new thinking and new fresh ideas was a key success factor. I must say they welcome me with open arms. So that make everything very, very easy.
Nice. And I guess with that, there were, when you arrived into those businesses, there may have been quite a few kind of legacy systems to kind of overhaul. What were the biggest bumps in the road when trying to change those or update them or overhaul them entirely?
Clara has a very strong SIP backend, very, very, very strong. Is on the walls, more or less. My role was more customer facing, and there we have a lot of legacy in the stores. The web was in a good platform, but very outdated. But more than technology, the biggest change was bringing agile and product-oriented organization.
Mhm.
Uh, and that sometimes is like a stick to the legacy. So if you work in SAP, you work in waterfall. If you work in the web, you work in agile. And I think that was one of the most difficult conversations to have. What really agile means, and agile is not something for the cool kids, and then the other kids plays another kind of game.
Mhm.
Agile is for everybody. So mostly in the DevOps, in the operational side of IT, it was some difficulties to bring people to the same speed of change, the
Yeah.
digital demands versus the speed of change of legacy in a best system. So I think that was the biggest constraint around bringing product-oriented organization to the table and change from project to agile. That was another big change management
Mhm.
process. But as I say, with open-minded, be patient, communicate, start small, not trying to change everything at once, and
Mhm.
show the way walking. That
Yeah.
was the formula.
That's a really good answer. Thanks, Mercedes. And then one last question from the audience, and it's a big one. With globalization within retail, consumer habits are different due to geography. How did you manage localized innovation and repeating these projects on a global scale? Was there a battle between local and global digital strategy? That's a big one.
That's a very big one. I can refer there to IKEA because we did have that experience at IKEA.
Mhm.
We decided consciously to create environment for local innovation, because the innovation that is generated in the headquarters sometimes is very far away from the spirit of the customer.
Yeah.
As closer you are of the customer and as closer you are from the coworkers, as better innovation you do, because they are the ones living with the problem every day. So what we did was we create environment for every country, every store to have a possibility to innovate. Sometimes it was incremental innovation, was not like disrupting the company, but it created a mindset that was very important. And then creating the means to understand where that innovation has been popping up, supporting them. So it's not just a theater, an innovation theater. It became a clear value. And for that sentence, you need to support them with APIs, with information, with prototyping. And then the ones that were very much in tune with the strategical direction and the gaps that we have in capabilities, then global going and support them to grow, to create a real product, and then bringing it back to the integration of the business model. That's the difficult part, actually, to
Yeah.
bring back things and integrating in the current business, in the performance engine. But we did have process for that, and we encourage. IKEA is a very inclusive company, and we are very clear that closer to the customer is where the reality and the truth is. So make sure that you create capabilities for the countries to grow.
Nice. And then one final question from myself. How much do you think that the pandemic is going to change business in a sense of digital or technology transformation? We've covered quite a lot around that, but ultimately, what do you think the biggest change will be? Will it be an internal reorg? Will it be a new customer journey, for example?
I hope that it will be an internal real, because new customer experience, we are already experienced that. I mean, these are new formulas, new retail experience created with technology out there that they are not going to disappear. But what I hope we all bring with us together is the humbleness to understand how vulnerable we are, all of us, and the humbleness to understand how important it is to have a strong organization that belongs and believe in your purpose, and are working over and above to make sure that you stay in business. So humbleness in front of what has happened, and help the organizations to keep that spirit that we have right now, of collaboration, of speed, and making sure that you support your coworkers, you stay behind them, you trust them, even when they are at home, because amazing things have happened, and I hope they continue to happen. So we don't lose that. That's what I hope from the pandemic. Technology, yes, it's gonna stay. We've seen so many good examples that it's just keep hook on them and keep developing.